It's good to see everyone. You're all looking very, very nice this evening. And it is the beginning, so it is the quarter numero uno, the first quarter. And of course, as all good things, and once again, good to see everyone, as all good things must begin someplace. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with just one step. So a show of, well, less than 1,000 miles, but begins in this case with a first quarter. And so, once again, good to see everyone. I see, obviously, we're joined by Lady G.
Hey, everybody.
Yes, good to see you as always. We have, of course, our match set of Steves, smiling Steve Atkinson, who is directly to my right. And then beneath him, of course, our own Trademark Infringement Free Captain, Steve Rogers. So, we talked a little bit the last time. Once again, the holidays are almost upon us. About gifts, the giving and receiving of gifts. And sometimes that gift is, in the form of a thing or a person, but sometimes it can be something a little less obvious and tangible. So we're going to begin this show, and I'll start with Style and Steve. Since you were here first, I'll start with you. Now, in this case, it could be anything that you think is going to change the fortunes of the team for the rest of the remaining season. So it could be a particularly favorable schedule. It could be the return of a key player from injury. It could be some other change in the team that you think is going to be a big boost. But what team do you think is receiving or is about to receive the biggest gift?
I will say the Buffalo Bills, just because I think they have an easy schedule, which is probably a big gift for them. They got the Patriots tomorrow. I'm sorry, that's going to be a win. Then after that, they play the Jets and Dolphins. Both games should be a win on that one. And then the Bears and Bengals, again, both wins. And then they finish with the Patriots again, which is probably going to be a win. I don't see Buffalo losing another game for the rest of the season. So that's my biggest gift.
Okay. Well, first of all, very realistic and, of course, slightly unpleasant. I could tell the way you were saying it, you weren't enjoying it, but I'm glad you embraced the pain, or as we used to say back in when I got to be lean and green and young, embrace the suck. Okay, so I will jump down to, of course, we have a match set of Steves, so I have to complete the pair. Same question for you, Steve Rogers. What team do you think is about to get or maybe has just recently received the biggest gift?
All right. Give me a moment here. I've got a bit of dissertation for this one. So with the holidays in mind, I've got the biggest gift, and it's an easy answer for me because it's not just one gift. It's a plethora of gifts that just seem to keep on giving here in the land of purple. Yes, we are gifted one of the 7 easiest remaining schedules. And factor that in with our very low injuries. We're going to get back key Christian Darrisaw from the offensive line, Akili Evans back at cornerback, and Delvin Tomlinson on our defensive line. That will help make things better all the way around. And not just that, Kirk Cousins finally showed up in a primetime game with a real performance. So there is possibly light at the end of the tunnel now under the big lights for Kirk Cousins to perform when it's past noon or in 7 o'clock prime time, which is where all our playoff games will be. So is this possibly yet to come, the gifts that keep on giving, and maybe a trip to football Valhalla for this Vikings squad?
Well, first of all, very well put. It will be exciting to see because if indeed the reverse vampire himself, Kirk Cousins, can finally break the curse and be able to, when there is not the sun high in the sky, be able to trod the earth and be a night walker, I guess is the reverse. If you can do that, then maybe indeed this might be the year that you finally will, at the Hirot, slake your thirst with mead in the mead hall, right? If I'm ruining my, yeah, I guess that's actually Beowulf, but whatever. English majors of the world unite. So that brings us now, of course, to the lady herself. Same question to you. Who has either received or is about to receive the biggest gift for the rest of the season?
So I'm going to start off first with, and hey, everybody, Steve, at least when I'm on the show, you're going to need to refer to your team as Vikings, not purple, dude. You do not own purple. We also are purple, and I feel like our purple is actually the best. So, all the other times is fine. If I am graced to be honored to be on this podcast, no purple, bro. Just go ahead and go with Viking skulls or something else. But back to the thing at hand as I digress, I'm going to go with, sadly, the Chiefs. I think that first of all, I think their schedule is very, very favorable, like the Bills coming down the stretch. They have the Bengals, which I do actually expect to be a very good game, and the Chiefs are going to get back on them from last year. But after that, they have the Broncos, the Texans, who are tanking, the Seahawks, the Broncos again, and then the Raiders. So even though some of those games are division games, and typically I would be like, no, division games are tough. We're talking about the Broncos, ladies and gentlemen. And the Raiders can hardly get up for anybody. And I'm not sure where the Seahawks are going. So I feel like with that, in addition to they've had some, injured receivers, right? He's had various of his pass catchers here and there out, but, everyone is going to be coming back. And I think they're still getting back some more people on defense, one of their corners. So I think the Chiefs are being lined up to be put in prime position. They're actually already on top. And I think they have a good opportunity to actually stay there, stay on top. So I would say the Chiefs.
All right. Those are all very, very well-made points. So it's tight. To see if we can create some space. So I'll stay with you, Miss Gina.
Okay.
So the Eagles, of course, managed to walk on water for a while. But once again, if you try walking on water long enough, my dad used to say, you'll eventually get wet. And they did. They got a little wet. Not soaked, but, maybe up to the ankles. And the question is, do you think the Eagles have been exposed? And if so, what is their weakness? And then we'll move on, of course, to más o menos the Aguilera edición. Aguilera, of course, Eagle in Espanol. So I will open with you. Do you believe that the Eagles have been exposed? And if so, what is their weakness?
Okay, so it's something we've been talking about for a while now throughout this season. Even though they were going undefeated, right? It was obvious to see that you could run on them, particularly after Jordan Davis went out. It became even more apparent, right? And so I would say that the run defense has been one of their weaknesses. I will also note, though, that they went out and added Linval Johnson and Ndamukong Suh. So we're going to have to see how much improvement, they get in that run defense until Jordan Davis comes back. And once he's back, that could be very formidable, right there to have those, at least to be able to rotate in and out, right? So I think one of the things is by far the run defense. That can be a major problem in the playoffs, right? And in your pursuit to get to the Super Bowl, they have allowed, I think, in offensive scoring in general, they are allowing people to get on average about 50 points or so. Again, in the regular season, you can probably get away with that. Maybe in the playoffs, it gets a little bit stiffer. While they're putting up like 27 points, there's only one touchdown difference right there. So I think that defense will definitely have to step up, particularly the run defense. I would say that's one of their weaknesses, but I think improvement could be on the horizon with the personnel that they recently picked up. Got
it. Yeah, and they do have a fair amount of depth, even without Jordan Davis at the defensive tackle position. But both Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh are now, at the point in their careers where they have to be rotational players, even though they're both, very very formidable players. They're guys that can't play, back to back series.
Right, every down.
Might play a couple of downs here, take a series off, a couple of downs there, take a series off. But yes, at full strength, I mean, Fletcher Cox, even at this point in his career, is still an utter handful. And, it broke my heart when we lost the kid from South Carolina State who they got, oh my gosh, who we drafted and then foolishly get away in free agency who they signed because, oh God, man, Howie Roseman. But yeah, moving on. Steve, in this case, Steve Atkinson, same question to you. Do you believe the Eagles have been exposed? And if you do believe that, what do you believe is their most significant weakness?
So I do not think they've been exposed. I think they are the team to beat in the NFC. I know, Jalen Hurts is doing an amazing job this year, especially with a good offensive coach and a better offense around them. So I don't think the Eagles have any weaknesses. I think the Dominican Sue signing was huge for them. And so I think they are the team to beat in the NFC going forward.
Okay, so we have one yay and one nay. So I guess the tie we were broken by, of course, our Trademark Infringement Free Captain. Oh, Captain, my Captain, what say you?
All right, so it appears these pair of steeds are going to sail in the same boat together. An agreement on the Eagles have not yet been exposed. I believe they've only lost one game. Yes, they've been in 3 or 4 close games, and in a couple of instances have given up more than 30 points in a game. They still only lost one time in those games, and in those 4 close games, they are still undefeated, 4-0 in those single score and field goal games. So, although it was interesting to see how close the Colts came, they almost got them. So I don't know that exposed yet is the right word. I think they would need to have a 2 or 3 game skid for that to be considered being exposed. If they were consistently showing us the ability to be defeated, would more likely lead me to believe they'd be exposed. So right now they're still winning, and like he said, they're the team to beat in the NFC, 10-1. They've got the top seed. I don't think they've been exposed. That's a no.
Okay. And thank you for setting up a very smooth segue because, as you said, you think they might need a multi-game loss skid, which brings us to Más o Menos. And so I will stick with you. So for those who did not have the great joy of being in the classroom of La Profesora Eugenia Smiley or Doble Trevino, my wonderful Spanish teachers, Más, of course, means more, right? And menos is less. Más or menos, right? O is, of course, or in Spanish. So más o menos. You have to choose more or less. You can't go with the actual numbers being proposed because that would violate the very tenets of the game. So, will the Eagles lose 2 or more games the rest of the season, Steve? Más or menos?
All right, so yes, in this Más o Menos segment, I am going to actually climb out on a limb here, and I'm going to say that the Eagles are going to potentially lose up to 3 more games. I think the Titans and King Henry have a chance here to potentially match up and give them an L this weekend. And then I also think that their game in Dallas against Dallas just matches up in a way that I don't know if they're going to be able to be ready for what Dallas is bringing defensively. And I think Dallas is going to be able to get that upset on them there. And then they have 2 games against the Giants still on their schedule. No, I don't think the Giants are the best team, but they're definitely better than they've been expected to be this year. So I think that at least having to go against them twice poses a potential matchup issue for the Eagles and coming down to the end of the season where they may not need that last game of the year against the Giants. So I think Moss on 2 or more. I think 3 is what they'll end up with in a 13-4 record.
Okay. That brings us, of course, to Gina. Same question. 2 losses for La Aguileros. Más or menos?
Yes, so I agree. I'm actually going to go with Moss. I do think they could drop to the Cowboys. I think they're going to, because I believe, yes. They beat the first matchup. So I think that they'll split with the Cowboys. I don't see them sweeping the Cowboys. And I think the other game would also be one of the Giants. I agree with that. And possibly the Titans. Again, going back to what I said on the previous piece about that run game. You can't stop Derrick Henry, but will you? So you'll have to stop Derrick Henry if you want to keep the Titans from winning that game. So I'm going with Moss.
Yes, the old saying when it comes to a guy like Derrick Henry, you have to make him into a New York Times crossword puzzle runner, right? You can't let him keep going vertical. You need to make him go horizontal. Okay, so close out the segment for us, Smiling Steve, up there in beautiful Massachusetts. 2 losses, más o menos for Aguileros.
So I went with Manos on this one because, in my opinion, I think the toughest game they play down the stretch is the Dallas Cowboys. I think they should be able to beat the Titans. I know Derrick Henry is great, but I think that run game will be able to stop Derrick Henry. They should be able to beat the Bears, the Saints, and the Giants twice. So I went with Manos on that one.
Okay, now we have a little bit of separation. I like it. It's nice when we get. I mean, I love seeing people agree. It's the season of giving and loving, but I need a little bit of separation. So thank you very much. And speaking of things that I'm going to give thanks for, I want to give thanks for these very important messages.
The Team Nuts and Bolts Sports Store is officially open. Log on to www.teamnbsmerch.com and get your t-shirts, hoodies, polos, all sizes available. Once again, log on to teamnbsmerch.com. Get yours today.
It is now the second quarter. And staying with the Eagles and continuing the game sensation sweeping the nation, más o menos, we're going to look at some individual players on the team. And I'm going to start with Devonta Smith, the Slim Reaper himself, DVS, right? What else? He has another cool nickname. I can't remember them all now, but Slim Reaper, so great. So I'll start with Steve Atkinson. So do you believe that Mr. Devonta Smith will have 1,000 yards receiving, más or menos? So that means can't be 1,000 on the nose. Either he will have less, meaning up to 999, or over 1,000 yards.
I went with Manos on that one as well. I don't think there's enough games to get to that or higher. So I went with Manos on that one.
Okay, got it. Steve Rogers, same question to you. 1,000 yards, más o menos for Devonta Smith.
All right, so I did a little research and some quick math. Yes, he's sitting at 609 yards and 12 games into the year. With 6 games to go, and that was an average of about 50 yards a game. With the 6 games remaining, in order to get to over 400 more yards, he would need to bump that average up to over 60, about 67 yards a game. And I just don't see that much of an increase all of a sudden happening to him. So I'm going to go also with the Manos on that one.
Okay. And same question. Bring us on home, Lady G. Más o menos, Devonta Smith.
Definitely Manos. I also did the math and came up with about 49 yards a game. And that was actually skewed, that average, by 1 game this season where he had 169 yards a game. So you take that outlier out, and his average yards per game would actually be lower. So I agreed. Is Munoz? I don't see him making it. It looks like he's only probably going to get, if he keeps up that average, around 293 more yards for the rest of the season. o menos.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm glad everyone knows how to do math, which is not always the case. So well done. And I'll stick with you. So, Miss Gina, sticking with you and keeping the theme going, Jalen Alexander Hurts. Will he reach 40 total touchdowns? So it doesn't have to be passing, doesn't have to be running, just all those together. I don't care, fumble recoveries, whatever it is, but all the different ways that a person can score. Will he get to 40? Well, not 240. Will he get más or menos? So either less than 40 or more than 40.
I'm going to go más. So far, he has 17 passing touchdowns and 8 rushing touchdowns for a total of 25 through 12 games. And I do believe that, so he would basically need about 15 more touchdowns over these last 7 games, which is about 2.5, give or take, a game. I think he can definitely do that. I think coming down the stretch, based off of some of the teams that they're playing, whose defenses just won't be up to par, and given the fact that he's a true dual threat quarterback, and if you leave him those running lanes, he will take them. And I've noticed in the last several games in the second half, they tend to do a lot more running, including himself, than in the first half. So I'm going to go Mas. I do believe he can get to over 40 touchdowns for the rest of the season. And that puts him clearly in the MVP conversation.
Oh, look at you anticipating. Okay, that I will now go to my captain. So, Steve Rogers, 40 touchdowns, más or menos for Jalen Alexander Hurts.
All right, so yes, he is at 25 currently at 12 games into the year with the 17 and 18 split. If you were to say roughly take half of each of those and add 9 and 4, that's another 13 and just slightly shy. But I think there's some outliers to that because of some of the teams he has remaining and some of the matchups. I also think that he is going to continue to ascend from the position that he's currently been performing at. So I think we're going to slightly exaggerate those numbers, and I think he's going to finish somewhere around 42 to 43 total touchdowns on the season. So I'm going in the Moss category.
Okay, we have 2 going Moss. Let's see what happens in the beautiful subtropical paradises in Massachusetts as we go to Mr. Smiling Steve Atkinson. Más or menos, Steve?
So I'm going with Moss also because, again, he is very powerful in the run game and also in the passing game as well, as we've seen all season. And with the teams, like was said earlier, with the teams they're playing, the Giants, the Saints, he can score on those teams. And even the Bears, too, even that defense. So, yeah, I would say Moss on that one.
Okay. So, once again, it's tightening up. Everyone's agreeing again. Let's see if we can break it up a little bit. Now, sadly, Brock Viarra, the babyface assassin, could not be with us today. He's still with us, like he's still very much alive. Unfortunately, yes, he's fine. But he got called into work. It happens, even to the best of us. I know.
That W thing.
The stories I could tell.
The
work, just cutting into all my football stuff.
Absolutely, that part, Bill.
That part.
I have to have a talk, really. I mean, if we could schedule around my football thing. So this is a segment, and I'll be honest, I completely created this segment inspired by him. But in his honor, we will continue on even in his absence. So I will start with you, Steve Rogers. And the segment, of course, is, ladies and gentlemen, everyone loves it, dots to the ops. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with the vernacular, the ops are, of course, your opponents, the opposition, your enemies. If you are the Jets, they are the Sharks. If you're the Capulets, they are the Montagues. And so, when you deliver dots to the ops, that means that you are actually giving an advantage, succor. You are giving aid and comfort to the enemy, giving them an advantage against you. So, I'm going to ask you, our captain, Mr. Oh, wait, that's not what I meant to do. Here we go. I'm going to ask you, our captain, to please tell us, who do you think delivered the most dots to the ops?
Well, early on Thursday night, for a second, I thought I was going to have to put my own Kirk Cousins in this segment when he threw that first ugly pick in the first quarter, who then he recovered and had a stellar game after that. So moving on from that potential nightmare that didn't happen, I actually have to go with my favorite target of my usual dots to the ops or darts to the enemy. I am going with Aaron Rodgers serving up 2 dots to the ops to the Eagles on Monday night and losing them the game, potentially because of those 2, since they only lost by 7 points.
Yes, I had a feeling that was where you were going to head. I thought I could almost see your pupils dilate when you saw that this was a segment, and you were like, "Ha ha ha! My fiendish plan has come together." So you're welcome, Steve. I will now go to the other set of Steves that we have. Steve Atkinson, who do you think delivered the most dots to the ops?
So I'm going to go with Jonathan Jones, who couldn't cover Justin Jefferson on Thursday night. Your main target was to cover the best receiver Minnesota has, and he just couldn't do it. He got burned all night by Justin Jefferson, and they couldn't stop him, obviously. So I would go with Jonathan Jones on that one.
First of all, the friends, family, and supporters of Jonathan Jones are making it very clear that the thoughts and feelings of one Steve Atkinson do not reflect the thoughts and feelings of NBS media as a whole or the show as a whole. Please direct all of your slings, arrows, and venom towards just one person and not the nation. But it was not the best night at the office, and I'm sure film study day was not the best Monday ever for Mr. Jones. I would agree with those assessments. We will now go to Gina. Who do you think delivered the most dots to the ops?
So I looked at this kind of from week 12, and then I also looked at like overall for the season. And there was the low hanging fruit of Rodgers. Dak also threw 2 interceptions and all of that. But I decided to take a look at the fumbles for the season, right? Because we all think about interceptions for quarterbacks. But what about those fumbles? And so I found that there were 2 quarterbacks that have had 13 fumbles this season through 12 games, 13 fumbles. And those were Matt Ryan and Justin Fields. However, the thing that makes it more of an opportunity or more something for the ops is how many of those balls are recovered. And so when you key in on that, even though Justin Fields has had 13 fumbles, only one of those is recovered. So I'm like, okay, I can live with that. But then we have the quarterback who's had the highest fumbles that were recovered by the other team, was actually Trevor Lawrence, who's had 8 fumbles, and 5 of those were recovered by the other team. So you definitely, I have to count that as straight up dots to the ops. So I'm going to go in the direction of fumbles. And even though he played extremely well, I have to say thankfully this past week. But for the season, 8 fumbles, 5 of those recoveries. So I'm going to give it to T-Law.
Gotcha. And you're right. People do not talk about fumbles nearly enough because interceptions get all the highlights. Like you don't get highlight reel fumbles nearly as often as you get highlight reel interceptions. Partially because it's more fun, right, to watch an interception happen if you're a viewer, unless of course it's your team, then it's very painful. But at least for the general public, it's more fun to watch because fumbles tend to be, first of all, hard to see half the time, right? You're just a clump of very large, angry men, and you can't really tell. Right. It's essentially a pig pile, right? No one knows what's really going on. I've been on the bottom of a pile. It's not a good place to be. It's, truly, truly awful, disgusting things happen down there. I've seen the worst of humanity, straight up war crimes. But yes, so yes, it's not even pleasant to think about. Let's change the subject. But yes, so that's why interceptions tend to be more focused on in terms of like what people watch. And then last but not least, we don't think of fumbles often because you don't talk about them as much, right? When people say, "Oh, so and so's having a terrible season," they mention touchdown interception ratio. They don't mention, Oh, and fumbles, right? Oh yeah, we forgot fumbles. The only person who's I've heard talked about recently for a while was Danny Dimes, right? Daniel Jones struggled mightily his first 2 seasons with fumbles, and I don't want to say they fixed it completely, but he's gotten so much better. So
I
shout out
agree.
to Brian Daboll, his entire staff of magicians, with what they've managed to do. Now, let's go to our next segment. So, buy, sell, or hold. So those who watch Jim Cramer's Mad Money will enjoy this segment. So the idea is to treat players as if they were a stock. And when you are giving a buy call on a stock, you're saying that this is not just a stock that you want to own. You want to own more of it. You want to buy all of it you can. How much do you have? Once again, that money you've been saving for grandma's operation, you can replace it later. Right now, you can buy. Take everything you've got and buy. A hold means, hey, I'm getting a good return on investment. This is a nice, solid investment, but I'm just going to maintain with what I have. This is good. This is fine. I don't need to do anything different or special. And then a sell means I got to get out. I got to get out. The bottom is falling out of this thing. Everything, right? It's like the ending scene of Trading Places. I'm dating myself, obviously, but that scene where like they can't get to the floor fast enough to try to get out. What? The orange juice, the orange futures just came in, right? Okay, enough of dragging people back 40 years in the past. So now it is time to play buy, hold, or sell. I will start with our captain, with our trademark infringement free Steve Rogers. I'm going to give you a list of players. I will start with someone you're very familiar with, Kirk Daniel Cousins. All you have to do is say, once I go through the list, whether you want to buy, hold, or sell on that player. If you would try, you don't have to elaborate much. Please don't, as you said, dissertation. This is not the place for a dissertation. You could give a brief explanation. But if you give a dissertation, I will simply cut you off and you lose points. So I will go through the list once again briefly. It is Kirk Daniel Cousins. For a while known as Kirk O'Chains, but I guess they've snatched that nickname off him again. Then we have Geno Smith, Derek Dallas Carr, CJ, formerly known as Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Cordero Patterson, Jeff Wilson Jr., and Matthew Judon. So tell me, and we'll start with the first, of course, Kirk Daniel Cousins. Is he a buy, a hold, or a sell?
Okay, I guess I slightly misread this, but I'll go along with the list.
You don't have to choose all of them. You can just choose one or a couple. But
okay, I did out of the list. I did take one of each for you. But okay. I could go down the list quickly. For buy, I am absolutely buying CJ Gardner-Johnson. All I can get my hands on.
Okay, all right. Okay. Good. Okay. And if you want to get one more, you can. If not, we can move on to the next person.
I'll give you one for each. And my hold, I am going to go with none other than my own quarterback now, Kirk Cousins. I think he's doing just fine. Exactly what he's doing right now. He might be able to rise a little bit. I don't really see his ceiling expanding a lot, but I don't think he is peaked either. So I think we're right and fine, right where he is. We don't need to get rid of him. We don't need to upsell. We don't need to do anything. Okay. So I'm sticking around with Kirk Cousins.
Okay. And you had to sell also?
And then for my sell, get out now, I think that has to be none other than Derek Carr. I think he has more than peaked, and I think he is on the downward spiral. It's time to get out of Derek Carrville.
Okay. There we go. Perfectly executed, and you stuck the landing. I will go to Miss Gina. Once again, you don't have to do every player on the list. That's when there's enough players to choose from. If you want to do more than one, that's fine. If you want to just do one of each, that's also fine.
Cool. So that's what I did. I had a couple options for a hold, sell, and a buy. So I'll give one of each. My buy is actually, I like them both. But I'm going to go with Matthew Judon. Buy it if you have it. This dude he's leading the league in sacks at 12.5. He only has about 3 games this season where he actually had no sacks. We know the Patriots are pursuing that playoff game. I think this guy will continue to play well and get to the quarterback. So Matthew Judon is my buy. Interestingly enough, I picked CJ to sell. And I picked CJ to sell because of his recent injury. Unless I'm remembering incorrectly, I believe he has an injury to his kidneys.
You are correct. He has lacerated kidney.
Okay, yeah. And so he's out indefinitely. So that's why I picked him to sell, because of injury, not because of play. And then a hold. I had a couple holds. It was just very interesting, some of the ones he picked versus what I picked. But I did pick Kirk to hold. We know that Kirk does very well in fantasy football. He's going to get you somewhere between 16 and 22 points. And if he has like a fantastic day, it could be more. But he's dependable in fantasy. I can't necessarily say I want him for my quarterback, but in fantasy, I draft Kirk. So I put Kirk. If you already have him, you holding on to him. You're not getting rid of him, even with the couple games, primetime games or whatever that he had, which may not have been so good, unless he's broken the curse from last week's game. Let's see.
Okay. And of course, bring it on home for us, Steve Atkinson from an undisclosed location. Once again, for those who are familiar with the game, a hold, this means you're fine with what you have. You don't need to invest more. You don't need to get out. A buy means, oh, come on, give me all of that. I want it all. I'd get every bit of it. Like, I want to corner the market in this player. And of course, a sell means I got to get out. I got to get out. I'm getting killed here. And once again, if you saw the list, if you want me to give it to you again, I can. But if not, you can fire.
All right. So I'm going to go with who I would buy. I agree with Matthew Judon, best player on the Patriots team right now, one of the best defenders in the league. I'm going to hold actually Geno Smith. I think the best decision the Seahawks did, again, was trade Russell Wilson and get Geno Smith, because Geno Smith's having a great year. And I would keep him over Russell Wilson at the moment because I think he's washed. And the sell player I picked was Derek Carr from the Raiders as well. The Raiders have to move on from this guy. He has zero connection with Josh McDaniels. He was crying at the podium a few weeks ago after a loss, I think it was. He has no desire on that team. The Raiders needed to find another quarterback.
Okay. So it's tightening back up, but Miss Gina may have opened a little space, maybe just a little space between her and the rest of what we call in French, the peloton, right? The rest of the pack. And speaking of the pack, it's a good time right now to think about how you're going to pack your little sleigh with lots of gifts. And what better gifts than these wonderful items?
Baby, you know what I need. Want you to see everything. Want you to see all of the lights. I'm trying to tell you all I can say.
In the third quarter, 3/4 of the way home, and the return of yet another one of our most favorite segments, Sleeper or Keeper. Now, so we're looking once again at this specific week that just passed. Now, I'm not saying you can't consider the season as a whole, but try to focus on this most recent week. And we want to think about a first or second year player, so someone who is at the beginning of their career. I don't want to hear about somebody who's been in the league for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. First or second year. So either someone who's a rookie or someone who is, like I said, close to a rookie. And I want you to think about what happened this week, past week, that proved that they're a player that, well, I guess if we're referring to our previous thing, would be a buy, right? A strong buy. And I'll start with Steve Rogers this time. So think about a young player in this past week that proved that they were either a sleeper or a keeper. Of course, a keeper means is somebody that you think you can build around. A sleeper means maybe they're not quite ready. Maybe they need to be put back in the oven.
All right, for my keeper this week, it was kind of easy for me. Garrett Wilson had a breakout game with the backup quarterback, Mike White, catching 2 touchdown passes and getting 95 yards, almost crossing that century mark. So Garrett Wilson, my rookie wide receiver, is my choice for keeper.
Okay, got it. I will go to Miss Gina. What rookie or second-year player proved either that they were a sleeper or a keeper in your mind this past week?
So I decided to go Homer here. Didn't do that last week. So I went with Tyler Linderbaum, our rookie center. This dude has been playing so extremely week, including last week. Not allowing pressures, not allowing sacks. And, as a rookie center or offensive lineman, not racking up a bunch of penalties and things like that. So that dude was a great pickup. I am so glad that we have him. Somebody that I know a lot of people coveted. Definitely going with Tyler Linderbaum here.
Yes, and terrific multi-sport athlete, right? Was a great discus guy, was a great wrestler. The only loss that Tristan Wirfs had his last year in high school was to Tyler Linderbaum. And it was an epic battle, right? The two of the greatest athletes that area has ever produced, at least in the recent memory, facing each other on the mat. And Linderbaum giving up about 2 years in age and about probably 40 pounds. But he managed to get a lateral drop close to the end of the match because they'd been very tight. I think they were tied at the time. He got a lateral drop. And from that 3 points, he was able to then give up one escape and ride out to a 2-point victory. But yes, for those who don't follow high school wrestling, what's wrong with you? But yes, that brings us to our next segment. Yes, things are getting weird, but I like it that way. So, for those who are not familiar with how we like to do it around here, it's the return of, you guessed it, Scranton or Canton. And that means that we're going to decide based on what we've seen about a certain series of players, whether or not we think they're headed for Canton, meaning, of course, induction in that most hallowed place on earth for a football player, the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Or will they be pounding out those phones, trying to sell, shredding machines, trying to sell maybe some copiers, maybe trying to move some reams of all-purpose copier paper, or, maybe some paper cutters, or maybe those like inspirational things to put on your wall, the things like "hang in there, baby," right, with the cat on it. Office supplies. So which direction, which do you think? So we will look at some players that we think are headed to Scranton, some that we think are headed to Canton. And so I'm going to give you, it's an all quarterback edition. In fact, it's an all backup quarterback edition, because who doesn't love a backup quarterback? I'll start this time with Lady G, Miss Gina. So I'm going to give you 2 quarterbacks, one of whom is, of course, the aforementioned Mike White, who had a, impressive performance for a guy that only recently got starters reps of the Jets, and then also Jordan Love, who got thrust out there due to a combination of thumb and rib injuries to Aaron Charles Rodgers. Give and assign to each one of them a designation.
So the first question that I actually had when I read the question was, are there any backup quarterbacks in the Hall of Fame? So I really wanted to know, literally, was that a thing? Couldn't necessarily find that, but that was just the first thing that came to my mind. So specifically to Mike White and Jordan Love. First off, have not seen enough from these two gentlemen at all. Mike White has played in about, it looks like 6 games. Jordan Love, 9 games. I'm like, when was Jordan Love in 9 games? It doesn't seem like it to me. I don't remember that, but in any case, Okay, so Mike White has been in 6 games, started for 4. He has 8 tutties, 1,268 yards. Jordan Love was in 9 games, but when? He started 1 and he has 3 tutties. To be honest, I haven't seen enough from either one of these gentlemen to really make a true assessment. But I'm just going to say, with the low-hanging fruit part, just based off of stats, since one has played 3 less games, but has more yards than tutties, I'm going to go Canton for Mike White and Scranton for Jordan Love. But let's be honest, we need to see a full several years of these guys to see what they're really bringing to the table. But that's my assessment just based off of that. Simply stats.
Yes. And what should be pointed out right now is the very purpose of the segment is to force you to make a difficult choice. So if it were easy, anybody could be sitting in that chair. But we mean Canton, obviously, not literally in the sense of them being inducted. But to your question you asked, it depends how you define the word backup. There are at least a couple of guys in the Hall of Fame who spent time in platoon systems as quarterbacks, believe it or not, much of their careers. So originally, when the Cleveland Rams became the Los Angeles Rams, they had a quarterback named Bob Waterfield who was married to an actress, very, very well-known actress. And it was like he was very Hollywood, good-looking guy, even was in a couple of movies. And they drafted, despite having him, another quarterback who was a irascible Dutchman who, despite being only 2 years in college, was about 25 years old as a rookie because he spent 3 years in the war, because, World War II. And so Norman Brocklin and Bob Waterfield actually were a 2-quarterback system with the Rams for a while. And then finally, the Dutchman got fed up with that. It's like, this is for the birds. I'm sure he said something filthier than that, but I'm going to clean it up for us. And he left and went to Philadelphia and briefly had it all to himself. But guess what happened? They drafted another quarterback. And he found himself in a platoon system with young Sonny Jurgensen at the end of his career. He is very much a Hall of Famer and still holds the record for yards passing in a game at 554 yards. And he did this at a time when it was so much harder to pass the ball. When you could basically hit a quarterback in the spine with a truck transaxle, it was no big deal. And you could ride receivers like a polo pony all over the field and play on. So the fact that he set this record that no one has really only a couple of them even very close. There's about 3 or 4 people, including Marino. I think Roethlisberger busted 500 once, and maybe 1 or 2. But still, with all the advantages, only about 3 or 4 quarterbacks even come close to this record. It's still one of the most amazing things this record has stood so long. Okay, enough history lesson. Let's move back to the show. Sorry, kids. Same question to you, Steve Atkinson. For these two, I don't know why with backup quarterbacks. I won't do it again, I promise. But give me your assessments.
So I went with Mike White was Canton, just for the fact that the Jets looked like a complete team, more so this past weekend than any time this season with Zach Wilson. Keep that kid benched for the rest of the year. And Jordan Love, I'm going to say Scranton, just because I think the Packers are at ground zero when it comes to the future of their quarterback post Aaron Rodgers. We haven't seen much of Jordan Love. He seems like to be a bust. So, yeah, I would say Canton for Mike White and Scranton for Jordan Love.
Once again, friends and family members and supporters of Jordan Love, the views of Steve Atkinson do not reflect the views of MBS Media or the show or anyone else except Steve Atkinson himself. So if you are sending nasty grams or anything else, please direct them strictly to Steve himself. But I know why I understand the point you're making. And thank you for embracing the spirit of the question. And you're right. The Jets offense has not looked that good in years. Right. So I'm not saying, I'm just saying. And I remember Mike White from his time. He started his career obviously at South Florida, believe it or not, then transferred to Western Kentucky. And I remember that battle he had with Cooper Rush in the Bahamas Bowl. And I think both guys went over 400 yards or something. And I think 436 maybe for White. And that game when it was like, I don't know, 7 overtime, some of that, and they scored 60-something points each. It was crazy, one of the craziest games ever. And I said to myself, why does no one like Mike White? because he's with all the stuff, all the numbers he put up, nobody liked him. He went undrafted. It's like, why don't people like him? I liked him. I had him in my top, not my top 5, but I think he was around number 9 or 8 in my quarterback rankings that year. I was like, why does no one like him? Yeah, he's not mobile. He doesn't have the world's strongest arm, but man, he can always read defense. You can read them in college. You can read them. See what happens when a guy knows where to go with the football, how different your offense works. Okay, now same question to you, Steve Rogers. Scranton or Canton for both Mike White and Jordan Love?
Well, I guess family members and fans of the Jordan Love committee can also send their hate mail my way as well, because I am firmly in the camp of Steve as well, that Jordan Love has shown us nothing in his 2-3+ years sitting waiting behind Aaron Rodgers and is the supposed heir apparent to the reigning 4-time MVP or multi-time MVP, however you want to put it. If Green Bay had such a lucky shoehorn from easily transitioning from, at the time, Hall of Famer Brett Favre to potential Hall of Famer Aaron Rodgers, oh, how rough it must be to be a Green Bay fan. Well, here is the reality hitting you in the face now in the form of Jordan Love, a absolute bust at the quarterback position. It doesn't matter how many more chances and years you give him. He's not going to be the guy that gets you to Canton. He is Scranton. Now, on the other side of the shoe, Mike White, in a single performance, put up over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns out of nowhere. So I guess with that really is the only evidence and eye test that I have to judge on. I have to put him in Canton.
Yeah. Well, I think the last time he got a start, which was a while back, I think he went for 278 in that one. So it looks like he knows what he's doing. But for some reason, people aren't ready to buy into him yet. I understand it. He was an undrafted free agent. He went to South Florida, then to Western Kentucky. But ball don't lie. So before we go to our final segment, let's get a few more really important things out there.
Nuts and Bolts Sports Draft Central will be live from the Reese's Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. Our scouts Jeff Barnes and Bill Carroll will be on hand to break down the performances of the participants in this year's Reese's Senior Bowl. So make sure you tune in for all the coverage. As also, make sure you tune in to NFL Network on Saturday, February 5th, 2:30 Eastern, 1:30 Central.
So it's time to throw up your fours. It is the fourth quarter. And of course, this is the real moneymaker for the show, right? And it's been a great segment for the most part for one Steve Rogers. A few people have also nailed a few things. So it's where you get a chance to call your shot. And I will start with, well, since they keep talking about Steve, I guess I'll start with Steve Rogers. So Steve, you've picked on the same, generally the same target, but you've hit that target a few times. But let's see if you decide to diversify your portfolio. So call your shot, sir. Make a prediction for the next week.
All right. Yeah. So I'm going to take this moment and gloat my victory in calling yet again another upset win for the Steelers last week. Thank you. And then this week, with so many interesting games to be choosing from, it is a plethora of options. But for the game that I actually am going to go with for my upset pick of the week, I'm going to once again stick with the black and gold Steelers to upset the Atlanta Falcons and get themselves to a 5-7 record, I believe, and work their way back closer to that 500 mark, or close to that 500 mark that I think they will eventually. It's not an even number of games anymore, as close to 500 as you can in a 17-game schedule.
If we end up with a tie because of you, Steve, oh boy, I don't know what I'll say. I will go now to Steve Atkinson. Same question, sir. I want you to call your shot. Pick something, once again, bold is cool, but make it something that can actually happen, because it could mean points for you, as is meant for Steve, the other Steve, in the past.
So I'm going to say the Chicago Bears over the Green Bay Packers, because I think Aaron Rodgers has quit on the season. And so I think it would be a stunner if the Chicago Bears beat the Packers. So that's what I'm going with.
Is it though?
Yeah, I guess you got tired of picking the Packers to lose because you had a nice little streak going there for a while, Steve Rogers. I think 3 weeks in a row at one point.
Yes, I picked 3 out of the 5 consecutive losses in a row.
Yeah,
and
I
then
remember.
also I segued off of their other 2 that I could have called.
Well, showing mercy is obviously a real show that you are an enlightened person. Now that brings us, of course, to Miss Gina. Same question. Call your shot.
So,
Give me a
yeah. So, not to cause any controversy, one of the games that I think that possibly could be an upset is the Jets over the Vikings. Dun, dun. So, I'm just saying because I think that the Jets are inspired now. I think that, changing of the guard, it did a lot. And not only was it a change, it was an effective change. They actually had good offense last week, right? And they needed that. They already had good defense, but they were not able to play complementary football because the offense it stalled, could not get it going. So I think with Mike White in there and being able to jumpstart that offense, they had offensive weapons. Hopefully their run game will, get back going and combine that with the defense that they already have. I think they could pose a problem for the Vikings. I definitely give the Jets a thumbs up in terms of a defense over the Vikings defense. But obviously, you have that dude called Jettis who can put on the Jets. And so I'm assuming it's going to be a Sauce Jettis kind of thing. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. I can't wait to see it personally. I hate that the game is on the same time as mine. But I definitely need to flip my other television to see what's going on there. But I think that could possibly be an upset there.
Yes, an upset like the stomach of one Steve Rogers, if indeed you turn out to be correct. That's good stuff. This is one of my
counter arguments, but read my preview article that came out on Nuts and Bolts today.
Ooh, well done. He dropped a tease. He pandered to the host previously in the segment. Oh, Steve, you know all the things to do to turn my head. That was well and effectively done. You're so close. Oh, so close. And you came incredibly close. In fact, you were like neck and neck. But I'm going to, for the spice Miss Gina just dropped in that last segment, I'm going to give her the win. I'm going to do it. Da, 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 da.
This is my seated gritty.
Yes, it is. So it is now your moment.
Thank you, everyone. Had a great time. Again, I'm going to take this opportunity to shout out my Ravens. Didn't end well for us last night, but please don't mistake that for the games that we're going to be playing for the rest of the season and where we're trying to go and what we're trying to do. It is still go Ravens. I don't care about anybody else. Go Ravens.
All right. And while you're up there, tell people where they can find your work and follow you on social media.
Wonderfully. Thank you. Miss Gina, Lady G, you can find me on Twitter at She Talks Football, 1L, She Talks Football. I spend most of my time on Twitter. I'm in Twitter Spaces. I host Twitter Spaces for all NFL primetime games. So Sunday night, Monday night, Thursday night, you're going to find me hosting a space so we can watch, do live watch of the game, talk about it. We have a great time. It's a lot of fun. So definitely check me out there. Check out The Undroppables. So theundroppables.com, at The Undroppables on Twitter and on TikTok. These are the fantasy football gurus that you want to go to. Great information every week about the wire, who you should pick up, who you should drop. Just looking at all the stats, helping you out. Because you know what? You're not just in the league to be in it. You want to win, right? So you might as well get alongside somebody or bodies that can help you and give you the information you need to help you win. So definitely follow the Undroppables. You can find some of my content there, and also on my own YouTube channel, She Talks Football. And so see you on Twitter. And I'm also going to be restarting some Clubhouse rooms. So if you're on Clubhouse, I'm going to restart doing some She Talks Football Clubhouse rooms.
Excellent. And I don't know how I didn't know about your YouTube channel, so I have to trundle my little happy self over to there and subscribe. Now, Steve Atkinson, tell people what you're up to, where they can find your work and follow you, sir.
So you can follow me at SteveA1127 on Twitter and covering the Patriots for nutsandboltsports.com. Also have me on here every Wednesday, No Huddle Necessary. I enjoy being on the show with you guys.
Okay. And we enjoy having you. Take us on home, Captain, my captain.
All right. I am the real Mr. Rogers 814 on Twitter, and you can find all of my articles and my podcast, the Purple Pride podcast, on teamnbsmedia.com. My latest preview, as I mentioned earlier, from Vikings against the Jets this week just came out early this evening and is available now. And I will be putting the fourth episode of the Purple Pride podcast later this week. Look for that. Also coming on teamnbsmedia.com and where all our podcasts are found.
Excellent. And since I don't have my lovable co-host here, the babyface assassin Brock Viarra, I will mention that he and I do, of course, the college football forecast. It airs every Saturday morning. We have the return of Donovan James to talk about USC and their prospects going, hopefully, they're hoping, into the college football forecast, into the college football playoffs, assuming they survive, of course, playing Utah in the Pac-12 championship. We'll also have Brian McLaughlin, who will give us all the best information about the FCS playoffs that have already begun, and they've now moved into the second round. We might even have a bonus special guest surprise, maybe. Got to watch the show to find out. And that will come up. So if you are on the East Coast, that will be 7:30 in the morning. It is 6:30 if you're Central Time Zone, 5:30 Mountain, and then 4:30 if you just didn't go to bed on the Pacific Time Zone. You can check it out. Once again, I thank you all of you. I thank you all for your attention. I think if
I think we have one more thing you and I also have coming up here, the beginning of our new show, the On the Clock.
Oh, yes. What better time to of course, throw it out there? So similar to this, but with actual time, like a clock counting you down. So you'll only have a minute. So we'll find out whose mind works like that. And it won't just be football. It'll be a wide range of things touching on sports and maybe even occasionally popular culture, but mostly sports or sports-related subject matter. And yes, that will be starting just after the holidays, if memory serves me correctly. So thank you for bringing that up. Once again, I thank you all for your attention, your talents, and your time. And we are OUT out.